What happens when a beloved British actor sits down for what should be a lighthearted morning chat show interview, only to face an ambush of personal attacks disguised as journalism? In just 39 seconds, one host's shocking question would expose the toxic underbelly of daytime television and trigger one of the most dramatic walk-offs in TV history. Hugh Grant arrived at the Loose Women studio that Tuesday morning, expecting the usual promotional circuit routine. His new romantic comedy was hitting cinemas nationwide, and morning television was supposed to be the safe space where celebrities could share charming anecdotes and plug their latest projects. The makeup artist had just finished touching up his face when a production assistant knocked on his dressing room door. 5 minutes, Mr. Grant. They're ready for you on set. Hugh straightened his tie and took a deep breath. He'd done this dance countless times before. Chat shows were like muscle memory now, after decades in the business. Walk out, wave to the audience, sit down, answer questions about the film, maybe share a funny story from set, and wrap up with a plug for opening weekend. Simple. The studio audience erupted in applause as Hugh walked onto the brightly lit set. The four hosts sat behind their signature curved desk, each with their morning coffee and notes spread in front of them. Denise Welch occupied the center position, her authority as the veteran panelist clear from her posture and the way the other hosts deferred to her. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the absolutely gorgeous Hugh Grant. Hugh waved to the crowd and made his way to the guest chair, positioned directly across from the panel. The camera operators moved into position as he settled in, adjusting his jacket and offering his trademark, slightly awkward but charming smile. "Hugh, lovely to have you here with us this morning," Denise began, her voice carrying that practiced television warmth that morning show hosts, perfect over years of live broadcasting. "Now, before we talk about your new film, which I'm sure is wonderful, I have to ask about something that's been all over the tabloids recently." Hugh's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. This wasn't how these interviews typically started. Usually there was some pleasant banter first, maybe a comment about the weather or how early morning television was for someone used to film schedules. "Well, I'd rather focus on the film if we could," Hugh replied diplomatically. "It's really quite funny, and I think your viewers would enjoy hearing about working with such a talented cast." But Denise wasn't deterred. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes gleaming with the kind of predatory interest that made tabloid journalists famous. "Oh, we'll get to that. But surely you can understand that our viewers are curious about your personal life. After all, you've been quite the romantic figure over the years." The other hosts exchanged glances. This wasn't what they discussed in the pre-show meeting. The planned interview was supposed to be light and promotional, focusing on Hugh's return to romantic comedy after several years in more serious dramatic roles. "I've always tried to keep my private life private," Hugh said carefully. "I think that's healthier for everyone involved, don't you? My personal relationships aren't really relevant to whether people will enjoy watching me stumble through romantic misunderstandings on screen." The audience chuckled at Hugh's self-deprecating humor, but Denise pressed on relentlessly. "Come now, Hugh, you're a public figure. Surely you understand that people are interested in the real Hugh Grant, not just the characters you play. And there have been some rather interesting developments in your love life lately, haven't there?" Hugh shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The studio lights felt hotter suddenly, and he could see the camera operators zooming in for closer shots. This was beginning to feel less like an interview and more like an interrogation. "I'm not sure what you're referring to," he said, though his tone suggested he knew exactly what was coming next. Denise smiled, but there was nothing warm about it now. "Well, there have been reports about your relationship status. Some rather explosive claims about your behavior in past relationships. Don't you think your fans deserve to know what kind of man they're supporting when they buy tickets to your films?" The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Hugh's jaw tightened, and for a moment, the charming facade slipped entirely. This wasn't journalism. This was character assassination disguised as celebrity gossip. "I think," Hugh said slowly, his voice taking on a steel edge that his romantic comedy fans rarely heard, "that my fans support my work, not my personal life. And I think that's exactly as it should be." But Denise had tasted blood in the water, and she wasn't about to let her prey escape that easily. "Oh, but Hugh, surely you can see how some might say that's rather convenient. Play the charming romantic lead on screen, but when it comes to real-life relationships, well, the stories we hear paint quite a different picture, don't they?" The other hosts were now visibly uncomfortable. One of them, a newer addition to the panel, tried to interject. "Perhaps we could talk about the film now. I'd love to hear about working with." In a moment, Denise cut her off sharply, never taking her eyes off Hugh. "I think this is important. Hugh, you've been married now for several years. But before that, there were some rather public incidents, weren't there? Some rather embarrassing situations that might make some people question whether you're really the romantic hero you portray on screen. The studio fell into an uncomfortable silence. Hugh's hands gripped the armrest of his chair, his knuckles whitening as Denise's words sank in. The audience, moments before laughing at his charming quips, now sat in stunned, quiet, sensing the shift from playful banter to something far more sinister. "I'm sorry," Hugh said, his voice carefully controlled but trembling with barely contained anger. "Are you seriously bringing up tabloid gossip from decades ago on morning television? Is this what passes for journalism on this show?" Denise's smile widened, feeding off his discomfort like a predator sensing weakness. Now, Hugh, don't get defensive. I'm simply asking the questions that I think our viewers want answered. After all, you're here asking them to spend their hard-earned money on your film. Don't they have a right to know who they're supporting? They have a right to know whether the film is worth watching?" Hugh shot back, his famous charm completely evaporated now. "They don't have a right to dissect my personal relationships from 20 years ago. That's not journalism, that's voyeurism." The camera operators continued filming, capturing every micro-expression on Hugh's increasingly frustrated face. The director in the control room was probably having a field day with the drama unfolding live on air. This was the kind of television moment that would be replayed endlessly on social media and entertainment news shows. Voyeurism? Denise laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "Hugh, you're a public figure. You've made millions of pounds trading on your romantic image. Surely you can't pick and choose which parts of that image you want people to see. The charming, bumbling Englishman on screen? But heaven forbid anyone asks about the real man behind the character." One of the other hosts, clearly mortified by the direction the interview had taken, attempted damage control. "Denise, perhaps we should move on to discussing Hugh's new film. I'm sure our viewers would love to hear about the comedy elements and—" "I'm not finished," Denise snapped, not even looking at her colleague. Her laser focus remained fixed on Hugh like a cat toying with a wounded mouse. "Hugh, I want to talk about accountability, about how celebrities think they can compartmentalize their lives. You want the fame, the fortune, the adoration, but none of the scrutiny that comes with it." Hugh stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the studio floor with a harsh sound that echoed through the suddenly silent space. "This is absolutely ridiculous. I came here to talk about a film, not to be ambushed with tabloid psychology from someone who clearly has her own agenda." "Sit down, Hugh," Denise commanded, her voice taking on an authoritative tone that suggested she was used to controlling the narrative on her show. "We're not finished here. I think there are some important conversations that need to be had about celebrity responsibility and—" "Celebrity responsibility?" Hugh's voice rose, his famous stammer completely gone now, replaced by crystalline anger. "What about journalist responsibility? What about the responsibility to treat guests with basic human decency instead of turning a promotional interview into a character assassination?" The audience was completely silent now, watching this car crash unfold in real time. Some looked uncomfortable, others seemed riveted by the drama. The other host sat frozen, unsure whether to intervene or let the situation play out. "Don't lecture me about journalism," Denise fired back, rising from her chair to match Hugh's stance. "I've been doing this for longer than you've been making films, and part of my job is asking the questions that matter, not just serving up softball promotional fluff for celebrities who think they're above scrutiny." "Questions that matter?" Hugh's voice dripped with disbelief. "You're dredging up tabloid stories from decades ago and trying to pass it off as some kind of moral crusade. This isn't journalism, it's exploitation. It's using your platform to bully guests who can't fight back without looking like the bad guy." "Oh, you're fighting back plenty," Denise said with satisfaction. "And I think our viewers are getting a very clear picture of the real Hugh Grant right now. Not the charming romantic lead, but someone who gets angry when asked to account for his past behavior." "My past behavior?" Hugh's composure finally cracked completely. "What past behavior? Being young and making mistakes? Dating people and having relationships that didn't work out? Is that what you're calling past behavior that needs accounting for? Having a normal human life?" The confrontation had escalated far beyond anything the show's producers had planned. This was supposed to be a light morning chat with a beloved actor promoting his latest film. Instead, it had devolved into a public character assassination that was growing more vicious by the moment. "Normal human life?" Denise pressed her advantage ruthlessly. "Is that what you call it? Because some of the women who've been in your life might describe it rather differently. There have been stories, Hugh. Stories about how you treat people when the cameras aren't rolling, when you're not playing the charming Englishman. Hugh's face flushed red with anger and humiliation. The studio lights beat down mercilessly, capturing every moment of his distress for the cameras that continued rolling without pause. This is incredible. You're actually repeating unsubstantiated gossip as if it's fact, as if anonymous sources quoted in tabloids are some kind of gospel truth. Are you denying the stories? Denise pushed. Are you saying that every single report about your behavior and relationships has been fabricated? That there's no truth to any of it? I'm saying, Hugh replied, his voice shaking with fury, that my private life is private, that mistakes I may have made in personal relationships are between me and the people involved, not between me and your television audience, not between me and you. But Denise wasn't done. She had found her weapon, and she intended to use it until her target was completely destroyed. What I find fascinating, Denise continued, her voice dripping with false concern, is how defensive you're getting. If there's nothing to hide, if all these reports are just tabloid nonsense, then surely a simple denial would suffice. But instead, you're getting angry. You're deflecting. That tells me, and I think it tells our viewers, that perhaps there's more truth to these stories than you'd like to admit. Hugh stared at her in complete disbelief. The manipulation was so blatant, so calculated, that for a moment he seemed unable to formulate a response. This is unbelievable. You're actually trying to use my natural reaction to being ambushed as evidence of guilt. That's not journalism, that's entrapment. It's called holding people accountable, Denise replied smugly. Something that doesn't happen enough in Hollywood, if you ask me. Too many people get away with too much for too long, and then they act shocked when someone finally asks them the hard questions. The other hosts sat in mortified silence, clearly wanting to end this disaster, but unsure how to intervene without making things worse. The audience remained transfixed, watching what had become less of an interview and more of a public execution. Hard questions? Hugh's voice cracked with incredulous laughter. Hard questions about what? About tabloid gossip? About relationships that ended years ago? About private matters that have absolutely nothing to do with the film I'm here to promote? These aren't hard questions. They're invasive personal attacks disguised as journalism. Personal attacks? Denise's eyebrows shot up in mock surprise. Hugh, I haven't attacked you personally at all. I've simply asked about your past behavior and your accountability for that behavior. If you consider that an attack, then perhaps that says more about your conscience than it does about my questions. That was the moment, the exact instant when Hugh Grant's patience finally snapped completely. His face went from flushed to pale in seconds, and when he spoke again, his voice was quiet but filled with a controlled rage that was far more frightening than his earlier shouting. You know what? He said, his words measured and deliberate. I've been in this business for over 30 years. I've sat through thousands of interviews with journalists, talk show hosts, entertainment reporters, some good, some bad, some indifferent. But never, in all those years, have I encountered someone so deliberately cruel, so willfully destructive, as what I'm witnessing right now. Denise opened her mouth to respond, but Hugh held up a hand to stop her. No, you've had your say. Now I'm going to have mine. You want to talk about accountability? Let's talk about yours. You invited me here under false pretenses. You told my publicist this would be a standard promotional interview about my new film. Instead, you've used your platform to launch a coordinated attack on my character based on nothing but tabloid speculation and anonymous gossip. The studio was dead silent now, except for Hugh's voice, which carried clearly through the space without amplification. You want to talk about responsibility? What about your responsibility as a broadcaster? What about your responsibility to treat guests with basic human dignity? What about your responsibility to your viewers to provide actual journalism instead of this tabloid trash masquerading as meaningful conversation? Denise tried to interrupt. Now see here, Hugh. I'm not finished, Hugh said sharply, his years of Shakespearean training giving his voice a commanding presence that filled the entire studio. You sit there in your position of power, hiding behind the pretense of journalism, using your platform to bully and humiliate people who come here in good faith. You talk about accountability, but where's yours? When do you account for the damage you do? When do you account for the pain you cause? The cameras continued rolling, capturing every word of what was becoming one of the most dramatic moments in daytime television history. Hugh's famous charm was completely gone now, replaced by raw, honest anger that was somehow more compelling than any performance he'd ever given on screen. This isn't journalism, he continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. This is exploitation. This is using human pain and private struggles as entertainment for your audience. This is taking someone's lowest moments, their private failures, their personal relationships, and turning them into content for your show. And you have the audacity to call it accountability. Denise finally found her voice. Hugh, you're being completely unreasonable. I'm simply doing my job. Your job? Hugh laughed bitterly. Your job is to interview people, not to destroy them. Your job is to inform your audience, not to feed them gossip and speculation. Your job is to be a professional broadcaster, not a tabloid bully with a television platform. He began walking toward the exit, his microphone still attached, his words carrying clearly through the studio. You want a story, Denise? Here's your story. This is what happens when journalism dies and gets replaced by voyeurism. This is what happens when entertainment becomes more important than human dignity. This is what happens when people in positions of power forget that their guests are human beings, not content to be consumed. Hugh, please sit down and let's finish this properly. One of the other hosts pleaded desperately. Hugh turned back briefly, his face a mixture of disgust and profound sadness. Finish this properly? There's nothing proper about this. There never was. This was designed to be an ambush from the moment I walked through that door. Well, congratulations, Denise. You got your dramatic television moment. I hope it was worth it. He reached the edge of the set and paused one final time, looking directly into the camera. To anyone watching this, I want you to understand something. I came here today to talk about a film that I'm proud of, that I hope will make people laugh and feel good for a couple of hours. Instead, I've been subjected to a character assassination based on tabloid gossip and speculation. If this is what passes for journalism on daytime television, then we're all in serious trouble. With that, Hugh Grant walked off the Loose Women set, leaving behind stunned silence, mortified hosts, and one of the most dramatic moments in the show's history. The cameras continued rolling for several more seconds, capturing Denise's shocked face and the uncomfortable shuffling of her co-hosts, before finally cutting to commercial. In 39 seconds, everything had changed.